McKim, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Mandy. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you take a few moments to introduce yourself and tell us something about you and tell us why you're running for office?
Sure. I'm supposed to look at the camera or you?
Either one.
Uh-oh, choice.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher at St. John High School. Have been for the last 18 years. I teach subjects like economics, world issues, law, politics, climate crisis units, things I believe that politicians, particularly in the provincial government, should be well versed on. I have a long history of international organizing, which included a registered charity that linked more than 60 schools in North America, half in New Brunswick, to a community of kids in Uganda. Each school Skyped with them a couple times a year, raised $250,000. It was quite an adventure. I wish it had ended better on the other side. Like Harbour, you get knocked down, and you get up again. Did some work with the United Nations, trying to get teachers to bring more world knowledge into the room. I feel that feeds democracy. And then you can't have some, madman claim that nothing in the world is working. I like to spread the messages of hope where they exist. I'm a fighter, and ask my students as well that I lead with the heart. I lead with the heart, and like I've said with my emojis on social media, the right hook boxing glove comes when necessary. The Jerry Low, more independent approach. So, I wear red, but I've voted green and orange as many times as red.
What's a campaign day like for you in this COVID environment?
Bit of a mix, but by far what I've done the most is the door-to-door. And now when the Premier said that we were going to have an election in a pandemic and people were going to be congregated in polls, he talked about drive-through voting opportunities, but that has not materialized. It struck me as undemocratic to say to candidates, don't go meet your people. I find it disenfranchising, actually, because not everybody, particularly in Harbour riding, has access to the internet. They're cut off. And here we have these new candidates coming in, and they deserve a chance to meet us, face-to-face, door-to-door. And I have spent, at some doors, half an hour. My campaign team says, Alice, it's about meeting more people. Like, yeah, but that part of the MLA job, that one-on-one problem solving, I have so many stories I could tell. That's important. I think voters need to see that. I will give them that time, one-on-one, and it's been fabulous. I mean, this is my home. I'm from here. I've always lived here, so it's not new to me to see the challenges. But
I'd like to follow up on that voter turnout piece, because voter turnout has fallen over the years. In 1967, for instance, the provincial turnout rate was about 82%. And 2 years ago, in the last campaign, it was just a little over 66.
Yeah.
And I don't have to tell you that St. John Harbour has the lowest voter turnout rate of any of the 49 constituencies, and it's had that for the last 2 campaigns. Do you have an explanation for this? Or, how can the turnout rate increase?
It's not even my explanation per se. That is my favorite brainstorm that I do with all of my classes at St. John High. Group of 5, different, income levels, different race, national origin, test scores, doesn't matter. And they come up with the reasons as they dive deep into the problem, and then propose solutions, often based on data or what someone else is doing. So I do want to throw credit. I've been saying to people that I have thousands of student voices and ideas and their data, because I insist on, fact-based, peer-reviewed data. It's here. So I'm going to throw them credit on this answer, because it's so multifaceted why the voting rate is low. I would point first and foremost to our electoral system, one where supporting green or orange in a particular area can actually help blue. That offends me as somebody who really believes in democracy. I voted against Trudeau in the last electoral election as a protest vote, specifically over the broken promise on electoral reform. If people feel that their vote is just going to disappear because it's a foregone conclusion that, you know, red or blue or whoever is the winner, your voting rate's going to be down. The second I would highlight is education. The subjects I teach are not mandatory, so I try to make the classes enjoyable, informative, and word of mouth spreads, and so I get to keep teaching them. But law and world issues, some people say, whoa, I didn't have those choices in the past. Like, yeah, and that's a problem. We don't focus on mechanisms of democracy and change and power and show young people that they have power. Greta Thunberg can show them and is showing them right now, and I try to do the same. And I say, vote, please, but if you see something wrong, speak to power, write to power, protest in the streets if necessary, and if you're up for it, like I now am, run.
Yeah. We canvassed a number of community organizations working in the constituency and asked for questions. And so here are a couple based on the themes that emerged.
Sure.
The first one relates to poverty.
Yeah.
Poverty rates have been persistently high in this constituency.
Yeah.
Minimum wages are low and only tied to inflation. Social assistance rates are low. Millions of dollars have been spent by the province in St. John's since the election in 2015. What do we have to do to get that rate down?
Well, I'm never going to pretend to be the one that has all the answers. I do want to throw some thanks towards Living SJ right now. I think they've got it right, that we need to focus on education and healthcare. This is science. It's proven all over the world that when we focus on those two things at the core, you're able to grow and also have a population that is just obviously healthier and happier. And education can come in many different forms. It doesn't mean you get high test marks because you can memorize things. Somebody who can work with their hands and fix a car, to me, is a wizard. Like, wow. And then employment. Those are the three things that Living SJ focuses on. And we've seen other great things, learning exchange, lifting people up often to new horizons. So I want to throw credit to, I've said online that Harbour really is like a nonprofit core. People working for wages far below what their talents would dictate in the private sector. And so I want to say that good work is being done. And Living SJ said that some of the numbers are coming down, and the investment from the previous liberal government, the $10 million, appears to have been put to excellent use. I do want to though just back up and say, yesterday I was at a door and I was talking to a constituent, and their rent just suddenly went from $900 a month to $975. This is in a priority neighborhood. This is not, a fancy apartment by any means. She's going to have to give up her pets. That's the choice when you run a rate down. What do you have to give up? And that's where she landed. And it's just wrong. It's just flat out wrong. And when we look across Canada, we find that the average poverty rate is, I believe, 17%. But St. John's is 33, which is a good deal higher than what you see, for example, in Moncton and Fredericton. I had somebody on Twitter from Moncton last night taking issue with big heavy industry tax promise made by the Liberal leader, something my team and I pushed very hard and creatively behind the scenes to extract. That's going to do something, but it needs to be faster, because Harbour, the stats. I mean, I'm told it's half of the kids, below the poverty line in Harbour, and a third in St. John, which is double the national average. So it's unacceptable. But I want to say just something quick, because it's important to me. I stopped saying the word poor neighborhood, and here's why. Poor tends to broaden. It tends to, like your teacher wrote on a test, oh, this is a poor performance, right? And so poor seems to be such a broad word. And the people that I meet and that I know and that walk into my classroom every day, many of them from Harbour, they're rich in ways that some people will never understand. Rich in ways of authenticity, resilience, getting knocked down and getting back up again. supporting one another, having a laugh, honesty, you know, maybe not being attached to the materialism of, you know, what kind of thrift store clothes you're wearing. And so I am trying to just stick to low income because I think we need to recognize the spirit of Harbour and all the goods that is here, and not just say that, you know, your top issues are drugs and mental health. I mean, those things are important, absolutely, but that's not the story. The story is the people. It's the people of Harbour, and as I said, in some ways, very wealthy, but in others, in terms of income, struggling in ways that are preventable.
Part of today's story, I think, is COVID related. The pandemic certainly magnified the issues that vulnerable populations face. Food insecurity, isolation, mental health issues.
Systemic racism.
We heard from precariously employed constituents who raised the lack of paid sick leave as a major concern. The opening of schools worries many parents. What's your plan to ensure that these issues highlighted by COVID are addressed?
Yeah, no small amount of issues there. I think you're right to call attention to the fact that COVID has exposed our society, exposed our systems as fundamentally unjust. There's no reason that a virus that affects us all should be killing, you know, more people of color, more women, more people in low-income neighborhoods. And I know that New Brunswick has largely escaped the nightmare of this, and hopefully that will continue. So I want to just call attention to that point. But if you're asking what needs to be done, can you help me out with the question? Like what needs to be done to keep us safe, or my opinion on what we've done so far as a province?
We're just hoping that we could have some comment on how we can ensure that these impacts that have been identified, exaggerated impacts for certain cohorts of the population, how we can ensure that we address those.
Okay, so it kind of comes back to income in a lot of ways, because that's what people are telling me on the street is the biggest issue. You know, they're working less. It didn't qualify for CERB, but are still facing eviction. CERB came late. They weren't working at the time it all began, and then so no CERB and limited job opportunities there. People who are immunocompromised with pre-existing lung conditions, again, hold up on their own. We send senior citizens back to their homes, tell them to stay there, but don't provide the internet. I mean, that is a mental health disaster. And, you know, that would not have been expensive. I had a student out on his own with his boyfriend, age 16. Home was not a safe place. Home was absolutely not a safe place. This is an LGBT couple, and they could not stay there any longer. And all I wanted for them was an internet connection so that they could do their schoolwork from a distance. Couldn't get it. Tried and tried, but just kept being a no. So ultimately, I just drove over a bunch of documentaries and nonfiction books, you know, and said, you read this stuff, you will have had a good education over the next 3 months. And he did. Yeah. And we talked about it, but only on the phone. So that question is so big.
Sure.
Is how many things can be done to make sure that people don't fall behind. And I'll just conclude by saying, you know, because it has been, you know, so bad for so many economically, if not health-wise in New Brunswick, we need to make sure that what we see elsewhere does not come here. And I give full credit to Premier Higgs for bringing the all-party committee together, and for, you know, being a conservative that actually listens to science and put a very intelligent, capable woman named Jennifer Russell out in front of the cameras. You know, full credit, cheers to the Premier for that. What I do take issue though, and I see this in classrooms when there's, you know, group work, and then one person kind of goes to the front and makes it sound like they did all the work, And I'm like, no, I watched you guys. So you were researching, this was a team. But, one guy goes to the front, and that never ends well. People don't like that. And I'll tell you for sure, people do not like having an election in the midst of a pandemic. And when they saw the conservative signs go up, like 2 days after the writ dropped, I found out how long signs take to get ready. They were ready. They were ready, and I think people are seeing that. So, going forward, one thing we're not doing is looking for COVID. In other jurisdictions, there is, random testing of the population. And then you can truly know that it's not around. We need to find COVID before it finds us, essentially. So I would advocate for, being as fast and flexible as possible, in addition to the measures that have worked. But we've seen things work elsewhere, and we haven't copied them yet. Why?
Next question relates to our healthcare system. New Brunswick has the second highest rate of disability in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Constituents have raised concerns about mental health and addictions and wait times and access to a family physician.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do to improve our healthcare system generally and in the constituency in particular?
Well, I've been pretty clear, and I've had some say, Alice, are you sure you're with the right party? And I'm saying, yeah, I am. I believe in red. I believe that this is a different iteration, different version of liberals than even 2 years ago. I've had heart-to-heart talks with leader Kevin Vickers and seen how he speaks to people, and have come away feeling that, this red umbrella behind me that's shaped like a heart applies to the Liberal Party. So that makes me feel safe to say, without a policy or platform backing of the Liberals, that I wish to see more fair taxation. I wish to see big companies who've managed to escape fair taxation and pay lower rates than I do on my little duplex in the North End, or these other folks that I've been meeting with who are on the brink of homelessness, paying a higher tax rate than the richest of the rich. I don't see that as fair. I got a lot of flack for saying that the 18,000 commuters that come into the core of St. John every day, and we need them, and I feel that most of them are also going to be led by the heart. So I really want, if it seemed combative on Twitter, and I can be combative, I am a fighter, but I want those folks to really look at the numbers and realize it's not necessarily great to have a huge tax incentive to leave the city and then still come back in and use the pipes and the roads, and the emergency services, but not be contributing. I mean, they contribute through taxes in other ways, and I acknowledge that, but it's a change that needs to happen. So I wanted to talk about where the money comes from first.
Okay.
Right? I don't ever want to be one of those politicians that just say all the things we need to do without saying how to pay for it. So there's the money. We got it. So now let's do something with it. First, we need to show, the world, really, in terms of marketing, and I love marketing, that New Brunswick, and St. John in particular, is a fabulous place to live. We have incredible beauty. We have an ocean. Cities on oceans typically are bigger and have less poverty than this, particularly in wealthy countries. Why aren't we? And I wonder if we could be marketing ourselves better so that we get the medical professionals and nurse practitioners, doctors that are required to meet the needs. So that's one. We need to make sure that nobody is left without a family doctor heading into the emergency room, or not having access to affirming, empowering trans and non-binary healthcare or accessible abortions, like you would see from a place like Clinic 554. I mean, the numbers are there for all to see. The place leads to better healthcare outcomes. It saves lives. So I would certainly want that to be funded. When you look at addictions, I sat down with Dwayne Squires, again, breaking that rule of not talking to anybody for too long during a short campaign. We spoke together for 2 hours. He's the president of the local police union and vice president provincially. And I do what I've been doing with all the experts in this short period of time. And when they came in as guest speakers to my class, because I had many guest speakers, so these are the folks, about what he would do with money if he suddenly had a big pot of it. I wanted to hear from the expert. He said, number one, it's mixed income housing here in the South End core, but really, across Harbour. We used to have that, but it has fragmented, and that's a problem. He would have a safe injection site. I'm supportive of that. Again, the numbers are clear. That a safe injection site is a harm reduction life-saving facility that often will lead to people feeling more respected and not left behind, and have easy access to treatment when they need it. So again, it takes money, but we just got it through taxes. And finally, his third item was the school for the South End. St. John the Baptist is, I've been there several times, a school with honor, but the staff and the people of this community are ready for the already approved, designed, fabulous, costed. This is a community hub, not just a school, that we'll see 7 days a week, somebody in there, problem solving, helping people, providing internet access, community activities and engagement, the kind of thing that gets the voter rate up, for example. And maybe some people don't want the voter rate to be up because it's to their political advantage to suppress the vote. We see that often. I invite you to take a look at what this election looks like right now. But I'm for people actually voting. So a community hub can build that kind of spirit. The spirit is there. The spirit is there in Harbour. I know it. I live it. But the organization and the infrastructure is not yet there. So I know that my leader's on board for this school. Something I'm going to fight like hell for. I'm going to take the mantle of Jerry Lowe, who has become a close friend, and we joke around. This is a guy that worked really hard behind the scenes and didn't run to a camera to take credit. I'm meeting with people one-on-one that he helped. Part of the job I'm really excited for, getting in deep with problems and helping one-to-one. He did a lot of that. So as long as you have individuals in the city, be they MLAs or employees of a community center, teachers, police officers, mental health professionals that are actually connecting to someone, then you can start to tackle those healthcare issues. And I certainly wouldn't shut down overnight ERs. I tend to think that's a bad idea, and with a conservative majority, we know we're going to see that again.
Just 2 months ago, in July, in St. John, there were 89 people who were actively experiencing homelessness. Men, women, LGBTQ, young, old. Concerns were raised about systems and how sometimes hospitals or jails could discharge people into homelessness. What does the province need to do to end homelessness?
The first one's a no-brainer, and I've dug deep and done the research on this. Actually, as an editor of a student magazine that was published Canada-wide, had to do a real deep dive on homelessness. And what's fascinating and that people don't know is putting a basic roof over somebody's head. Yes, the government doing that. Providing them that little bit of stability and support. Some people might say, oh, can't spend money on these folks that, chose to get addicted to something. Big air quotes on chose. Okay, fine, let's just make the economic argument. It's cheaper. It costs the taxpayer less money to make sure that everybody has a roof over their heads. So homelessness should not exist, and in one foul swoop of government investment, it's gone, and an investment pays back, and it doesn't take long. So that for me is a no-brainer. Now, we have the system we have now, and I wish to highlight it briefly. I sat down with the chair of the Coverdale Center for lunch 2 days ago, and really wanted to learn about that facility, which does such great work for people, in need of that roof, of that care. And then I had a 20-minute conversation with a former student who has been in outflow for the last 30 days. Kind of cast aside, in this case, well, I don't want to say anything too specific, but struggling. you know, and just wanted to talk to me about what could be done. So obviously these facilities need more support. If we're not going to have housing provided, then we're going to need to make sure these facilities are well funded. And finally, I do want to mention one of the first people that I met on this journey of poking doorbells with my socially distanced umbrella is an older woman in her 70s, adorable, vibrant, a veteran. I met her when she basically dived to hold the bathroom door open for me on Tim's Waterloo, which is my office, because it has a lock. So she saw I was going for it, and she just, like spry as a cat, she just dives and opens the door, and we strike up a conversation. She talks about how proud she is of her own LGBT child. And then as I dig deeper, she says that she slept in the graveyard the night before. I said, what? Okay, and then I'm right into MLA mode. And I said that to people, like, okay, well, we don't have there's a bit of a void right now, right? Jerry's busy working for multiple campaigns, including ours. And it's just a crazy time, but I think people should still have access. So I said, okay, let me get into it. In the Coverdale Center, and she said, yeah, they've got space, but the love of my life right over there, he can't get into outflow. We call it, it's full, and I can't have him sleep alone. So we're just going to cuddle under the stars on the grass in the graveyard next to King Square, the Loyalist burial ground. And that brought me to tears. I mean, these two were adorable, and they got kicked out of their apartment halfway through the month. Always two sides to a story. I only got one, but she said she had the money. She said the place was well cared for, but regardless, kicked out, nowhere to go, sleeping in the graveyard. It's not okay. It is not okay. And I don't know what conservatives plan to do about this, because I think everybody knows. My message at the door is simple. The gap between the rich and the poor has been doing this for decades. Conservatives have lots of creative ways to keep it going. The other parties are into shrinking it. You decide which. I love green, I love orange, and I'm on board with red. I mean, this is a party that leads with their heart. I'm proud to be a liberal.
There was a specific question about Harbour that I was going to ask you, but you've already answered it.
Well, I give long answers, so that can happen.
I just wanted to get on record whether you support or not the proposal to build a new school in the South.
Absolutely, and I'm glad to see that Arlene has finally come and given us a position. So I agree, Arlene. I'm 100% on board as well. It's great that you came out and took a position on something. And whether I'm successful or you're successful or another candidate in this election, I want to say to you, Arlene, maybe we can work together. You can talk to people in the Conservative Party. I can talk to people in the Liberal Party, even if we lose. And just to keep hammering away that this is poverty reduction, this is healthcare, this is education, this is employment, this is internet access in a pandemic. Let's fight on this together.
Any other final comments, Alice?
I'm loving this. I want to just give the authentic answer. I'm loving this, and it's not the campaign like that. We don't have any polling numbers, so it's not like we're flipping through the book like on the TV shows I love, like legal shows and the West Wing political show, where you're like, okay, our numbers went up 3% because we said this, yay. Like, we're in a void. We don't know what is resonating, what is not, but I'm learning. I'm a teacher, and people think for some reason, and I guess it's the old education model, that people think teacher has knowledge, gives knowledge to students, and we move on. There aren't many teachers like that anymore, and I've never been that kind of teacher. They teach me, I teach them, we learn together, we do the research, we look for the nuance, we hear from all sides, we work together, regardless of political stripe or color or national origin, we work together. And I think government can work like that. I've been the only adult in the room for 18 years. I expect to find many others of all political stripes in Fredericton. But there are ways of pulling the levers of power to get big things done. And when my team and I embarked on a strategic some would say aggressive behind the scenes plan to extract a promise from Kevin Vickers and the Liberal Party to meet Don Darling and the city's #1 objective, which was keeping the heavy industry tax money here in St. John. The taxes raised here stayed here. $8 to $9 million per year that we've been spreading around the province. And I'm for equalization, like Alberta spreads money around the country. But St. John doesn't have Alberta money. We can't do that. And, you know, frustrated some people in communities that don't have heavy industry. But one recent study that Don Darling over coffee 2 days ago, because we sat down and gave him the good news, that we had achieved the objective that we set for ourselves in less than 10 days. And he was thankful. It's to look back 15 years and see the hidden costs of having heavy industry in your city. And of course, I'm not saying get heavy industry out of the city. I'd like it to transition to green and for those workers to be trained and full pay while being trained. That's a just transition. You can't just close the coal fire plant and send everybody home. So I'm for the industry in St. John. You know, that is a beating heart of the engine of New Brunswick. But it has come at a cost. $50 million over 15 years was the estimate from this one study that the mayor highlighted. So do I think we should get that $8, $9 million back every year? Yes. And we convinced Kevin Vickers to go on the record, on camera, and say that St. John will keep that money. It plugs our budget hole almost instantly. Transit comes back online, and a lot of other things that get cut. But it only happens if we have a Liberal government. So I invite anyone watching this video, if you live on the west side, Sharon's fantastic. North End, Tim. East side, Phil Como. And if you are in my riding, Harbour, send the lady in red to Fredericton. Let's see what happens.
Alice McKim, thanks very much.
Thank you.